Thank you very much, and I want to thank Christian Clement and Savita for inviting me here today. Savita is one of the leading think tanks in Norway. There are times, by the way, I think that Norway is nothing but an NGO and a think tank, and it's really great to be here and to interplay with them. These breakfast sessions, I know, are closely followed, and so I'm very honored to be here and share some thoughts with you over my experience for the last 4 years. It is really hard for me to believe that 4 years have gone by so quickly. And I want to thank you all for coming today. President Obama nominated me to be his representative to the Kingdom of Norway in September of 2009. Just 2 months later, I presented my credentials to King Harold, just in time to participate in the ceremony surrounding the President receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. I can't believe that it was really 4 years ago, and just yesterday I had my final session with His Majesty. I'm sorry that I'll be leaving. As a political junkie, I'm really disappointed that I'll be leaving before your government is formed. I followed your election with great anticipation, and it'll be interesting to follow from my home in Boston the results of the new government, and I will be keeping in contact with it. For the last few weeks, I've been reflecting on my 4 years here in Norway. One of the thoughts that keeps occurring to me is that life doesn't get much better than it's been here for us in the last 4 years. I have been honored and privileged to represent President Obama and the United States in this great country, a country that is such a contributor to the United Nations, to NATO, humanitarian and peacekeeping opportunities around the world. I hope you all appreciate the great role that Norway, for such a small country, does play in world events. What I did not know was how diverse the responsibilities that I would be getting into and how rewarding the opportunities being the U.S. ambassador to Norway would be. And let me share with you some of my thoughts and some of the highlights of the last 4 years, and especially Norwegian-American relationships. On moving to Norway, I discovered that one of the things that we needed to do on the practical basis was move our embassy. As most of you know, the American embassy has been at its current location just down the street here and across from the palace since 1959. It became too small for our needs, and in 2004, we purchased the land in Husby to build a new facility. There has been a great deal of controversy over the moving of the location. I know if any of you are familiar with the phrase NIMBY. Well, I certainly am. I did a lot of legal work in real estate in Boston, and I was quite surprised to see how prominent it would play here. Nevertheless, we were determined to go forward, and with Washington's support, we worked with the local authorities to gain approval for our building plans. The new facility had to meet our functional requirements, including security and efficient operations. The design had to fit the character of the site, which included a seasonal creek and some beautiful trees. It had to bring to mind an open and free democracy and illustrate the intersection of American and Norwegian culture. We think the new facility will do that, and we hope you all have an opportunity to visit it. I know many of you, we see people lined up to get their visas to come to the United States. I do encourage you to come visit us and to visit us in the United States. During these conversations on the new embassy, we had lots of opportunity to interplay with Oslo officials and the local community about the new facility. We've committed to making the site an example of energy efficiency and sustainability, from how we source building materials during construction to how we will light and heat the embassy when we move into it. I'm extremely proud that our efforts resulted in approval for the new location and design from the Oslo City Council, and we did break ground last May. The building should be ready summer of 2015, and I promise you that I will be back here for the dedication of that building. And hopefully be back here, as we'll talk later, many times before that. The relationships we have developed with Oslo City officials, which is part of the network of relationships across the economy and society that I've enjoyed help building through exchange programs and outreach. One of the things that I tell people, and sometimes they look a little askance at me, that I, as the ambassador, don't really make foreign policy for the United States. The President and the Secretary of State seem to be the primary makers of foreign policy. I help implement that foreign policy and work with the Norwegian government officials, etc. But one of the things that I do and have spent a great deal of time is improving the relationships between Norway and the United States. And that's what I've dedicated most of my time doing. I've also been told by many people here and people in the States that one of my jobs was to get outside of Oslo. Oslo is a beautiful and great city, I don't know if any of you have been to my hometown, Boston. Oslo reminds me a great deal of Boston. It's similar size, 600,000 people, narrow streets, hilly streets, on the ocean, on the water, and a lot of interesting similarities. And I urge you all to come visit us in Boston. But I was urged to get outside of Oslo, and I've had the privilege of traveling throughout the beautiful country. As my wife says, we've yet to see a bad view anywhere we've been. It's absolutely spectacular. I've visited all 19 folkers. I've visited Svalbard and even Jan Mayen. When I mentioned Jan Mayen yesterday to His Majesty, he mentioned, well, you know, I've been there too, but I had a longer stay than I anticipated. We couldn't take off on the first day that I got there because of the weather. It was an interesting experience. They don't have electronic facilities for landing in other than clear conditions, and the runway is all gravel, so it's a touch and go whether you can get in and whether you can get out. But it's an interesting experience. Over the course of my travels, I've met with mayors, governors, and business people. One of my favorite things to do as ambassador is talking with students. So over the course of my travels, I visited every one of Norway's 7 universities, met students and faculties at dozens of high schools. We've also got a program that I'm very proud of that we started just as I was coming, the Young Ambassadors Program. I don't know if any of you saw the story recently in the press about that, but we take young high school students, 20 of them a year, bring them into the embassy, bring in business and educational and political leaders from around Norway, and give them sessions throughout a year, and developing young leadership in the Norwegian students. I discovered that during the course of my work, while many Norwegian students wanted to pursue bachelor programs in the United States, some were unable to do that because they could not receive funding for the full American degree, the so-called, what I call the freshman year problem. I've been campaigning openly and very hard that Norwegian students could pursue the full 4-year course in the United States, and I'm very delighted to report that the Minister of Education finally relented after a lot of pressure to provide in this next budget freshman year funding. And I hope that you, while I am not here, will make sure that they keep to that commitment, because I think it's very important to give students an opportunity to come to the United States and study. And the number of students in the U.S. had declined dramatically in the 1990s and 2000, and it's on its way up, and I hope that we can see more students coming. And those students who choose to stay in Norway for their university still want to visit the United States. And we would like to encourage more students and more people to travel to the United States. We've worked hard at our embassy to facilitate the visa process. I know sometimes that's the thing that I get the most complaints about and the most difficulties with. And I was advised early on, please don't get involved in that. Pass it off to your consular officer. And I'm very pleased to say I think we've done a very efficient and effective job at improving our opportunities there. Another thing that we've done in terms of exchange programs, I've worked a lot, both the cultural community and sports community, in doing various exchange programs, so encouraging more students and others to come visit the United States. One of my favorite efforts has been teaming up with Tuda Pedersen, who I hope some of you noticed won the 5th major ladies golf tournament over the weekend. Tuda is an amazing person. I think she's Norway's best known and best athlete who doesn't wear skis. And she's been quite an inspiration. We helped her raising money for the charity Right to Play. It's an international charity with a strong Norwegian chapter, giving children in conflict-riven countries equipment, space, and training to improve health and sports activities. And actually, it was quite interesting. The highlight at the end of the golf opportunity that she had in the Pro-Am Challenge, they had a charity auction on a Saturday evening. I gather auctions are quite unusual in Norway. They're pretty familiar in the United States. And through that, through her forceful personality and the 7 other young women golfers, they raised $150,000 with Norwegians actually bidding against each other for certain events. I'm told it's quite unique, and I'm not sure it'll catch on, but it was an interesting thing to watch. One of my great pleasures in this job has been responding to invitations from the Norwegian diaspora. The millions, I think, at one point I met with the Minister of Defense, and I said, you know, Norway's a small country, you only have 5 million people. She said, no, Mr. Ambassador, you're wrong. We're a country of 10 million people, just 5 million of them live in the US. So I've had the opportunity of visiting the Norwegian diaspora. I've been to Minnesota 3 times, in New York, Texas, and in Seattle. The Norwegians in those areas are very eager to hear how maintaining ties can be improved, and they keep in many ways, a culture that binds our two nations together. As ambassador to Norway, I've also discovered how deeply connected Norway is with its neighbors and how all share links to the United States. In October 2011, I was privileged to participate in a gala celebration of the centennial of the American Scandinavian Foundation, delivering a message from President Obama to the King and Queen of Norway, King and Queen of Sweden, Crown Prince and Princess of Denmark, and the Presidents of Finland and Iceland. Quite an honor. And this is someone from America who had never met a king or queen before I came here. We sort of got rid of our king back in the 1770s. So it's quite interesting to have been at that, participate in that. These ties are not just historic ties. Norwegian-American relationships are fresh and growing, especially through innovative sectors of our economy and in how we are partnering to build a sound business environment throughout the world. Our trade relationship is robust and growing, and every day there are more direct investments between Norway and the United States. Our trade ranges from business services to medical devices, from oil technology to satellite communications, from hydroelectric know-how to farmed salmon to advanced aircraft. I believe I'm safe in saying that while there are always a few issues for our diplomats to work on, our trade and investment relationship is among the easiest and most problem-free in the world. That is in part because of our deeply shared values. One of the aspects of my time here that I've most enjoyed is that I found it very easy and pleasant to connect with Norwegians, to see things from a common perspective. I often hear Norwegians criticize themselves for being too blunt. Of course, there's nothing being too blunt for an American. It's easy to slip into a rapport, both comfortable and productive relationships, and we don't have to spend many years getting to know each other. Energy is at the heart of the U.S.-Norway economic relationship. Crude oil and petroleum products account for nearly 65% of Norway's total exports to the United States. American companies have played a leading role in developing Norway's offshore petroleum resources since 1969, investing billions in the Norwegian continental shelf. Each year, I get to go to an anniversary dinner with ConocoPhillips celebrating the first find in 1969. About 60% of U.S. direct investment in Norway is in the offshore petroleum sector. As a result of our working together over decades, Norwegian companies have become expert in oil out of the ground in some of the most challenging situations on Earth. And you've taken that expertise on the road. Statoil and Norwegian offshore service providers have become major exporters of expertise to countries such as Angola, Brazil, Canada, Mozambique, Russia, and Tanzania. You've even now come to the wilds of North America. Not many Norwegians know that about 10,000 of their countrymen live in Houston, or that Houston hosts 150 Norwegian companies. I was in Houston last fall at the Science Week, and it's an amazing number of Norwegians and interesting, innovative companies that are located there. In one of the most exciting energy development in recent years, Statoil in particular has seen the future in unconventional oil and gas in the U.S., and they've invested in Texas, North Dakota, and Pennsylvania. If deeper offshore fields are cutting edge of energy, then unconventional oil and gas are the other, and the U.S. is where the action is right now. This has happened with incredible speed. When I first arrived in Norway, one of the first things I did with our Secretary of Energy was travel to Hammerfest to see the new liquid natural gas terminal that was looking forward to exporting shiploads of LNG to the United States to meet our huge unmet need. Since then, the United States has become self-sufficient in natural gas. Indeed, we've become the biggest natural gas producer in the world. Not only do we need to import gas, but we are now licensing new facilities to export it. Interesting, at a recent talk that I gave on energy and other issues to a group, one of the persons in the audience raised his hand and asked me a question, and then sort of asked a question, making a point saying, you know, the United States has really been lucky winning the lottery in natural gas. You know, I looked at him and said, you want to talk to me about winning the lottery on energy? It was an interesting comment. A similar revolution is now unfolding in unconventional oil too, and Norwegians have had the foresight to get in on the ground floor. Altogether, Statoil has invested something in the neighborhood of $27 billion, that's US dollars, because that's where the important things are happening. We fully expect that technology and know-how are exportable to other larger resources around the world, And learning how to do this in the U.S. will be a very key to launching the broader world market in unconventional oil and gas. While on the topic of energy, I want to say that I've also been impressed with how much technological innovation is happening in this sector. Indeed, this is not really a business of getting oil out of the ground or resources out of the ground. It's really a technological revolution. The oil and gas industries have really been in the forefront of using technology. The reason that we have not seen peak oil, I believe, and I don't think we'll see it anytime soon, is technology in this industry has been moving at lightning speed, and it's incredible what they can do now. There are crews working in the North Sea and in West Texas who are doing things we couldn't have imagined even 5 years ago, crunching massive amounts of data to formulations that hold oil using advanced sensor technology to gather data, drilling with pinpoint accuracy and going horizontally from ships that are miles above the ocean floor and miles away, injecting oil wells and extending their productivity by years. It's amazing technology that rivals anything coming out of our Silicon Valley. And I've had the privilege of visiting 2 oil platforms, and it's really amazing to visit with the workers there and see what they are doing. A lot of this is happening with collaboration between Americans and Norwegians here in America and other markets around the world. Our public and private sectors are also cooperating in many other areas, including reducing vehicle emissions, which account for about 1/4 of the carbon emissions globally. Norway has become a top market for the American-designed built Tesla, the zero-emission electric cars that you see all around Oslo lately. The combination of Norwegian foresight in providing incentives for battery-powered vehicles with American creativity in making battery-powered vehicles that are fun to drive is a winner. By creating tax incentives, public charging stations, and access to bus lanes, the Norwegian government has helped make this the best market for these cars outside of California. My wife Eleanor and I had a great privilege of introducing innovator Elon Musk to our friends here in Norway recently. And I even got to drive a Tesla. I even got to drive it on ice because we're in Norway and I'm Boston. It's quite a great experience. Now, I just need to do the same thing getting the Segways admitted to Norway. Anybody want to offer me some help on how we can do that? I've also had the pleasure of participating in Leif Erikson Innovation Conference, hosted by the Leif Erikson Innovation Network, and share ideas on how we together can facilitate an even greater bilateral exchange focusing on innovation and entrepreneurship. This was in connection with Leif Erikson Day. We're beginning to get to the point in America, although we still celebrate Columbus Day, that maybe we'll recognize the accomplishments of Leif Erikson. Honoring the first European known to have set foot on American soil and the contribution of the Nordic peoples to the United States. I mentioned a moment ago that oil and gas industry is a center of a lot of technological innovation. It's an impressive story, but there's a lot more we can do together to help Norway broaden its base in the tech innovation and use Norway's special strength to leverage American capabilities to reach new markets and new sectors. We've been exploring relationships between Oslo MedTech and MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas, and that looks quite promising for making progress in cancer therapies. I've traveled to the San Francisco Bay Area, to Los Angeles, Houston, and Boston, and elsewhere to encourage the exchange of formal exchanges and personal relationships that help make business happen. We hold breakfasts at our residence almost on a weekly basis, bringing in people from the business community, educational community, cultural community to further our exchanges. On a government-to-government basis, scientists are frequently back and forth between the United States and Norway almost on a weekly basis. We have difficulty keeping track of them and sometimes difficulty supporting them for the numbers that come. Our people work together in carbon storage, hydroelectricity, wind power, nuclear physics, medicine, methane hydrates, and other fields too numerous to name. The scope of our common interest in the global economy reminds us of the importance of our partnership in meeting shared security challenges. Our partnership is active, it is robust, and we pursue in the context of our bilateral relationship as well as in the context of the North Atlantic Treaty as founding members of NATO. And so I accompanied Prime Minister Stoltenberg when he called on President Obama at the White House in October of 2011. President Obama commented, having seen Norway's contribution to NATO, the NATO mission in Libya, both of military pilots as well as humanitarian workers, Norway punches above its weight, said the President. The President also noted our close cooperation in moving forward the effort in Afghanistan, ensuring that Afghanistan organizations and people will have the capacity to protect and develop Afghanistan, ensure the constitutional protections for all of Afghanistans, regardless of ethnicity and gender. Here in Norway, I have participated in innumerable conversations, meetings, and dinners regarding defense and strategic partnerships. I have powerful memories of my 2011 visit to Afghanistan with the Norwegian Chief of Defense, General Sunde, to visit the provincial reconstruction team in Maimana. Furthermore, I have traveled, and this is part of the fun part of this job, in every imaginable sort of military vehicle, including flying in the backseat of a Norwegian F-16, taking a low-level aerial tour of the coast of Lofoten, off the coast of Lofoten in a Norwegian P-3 Orion aircraft, landing and then, thank goodness, taking off at Jan Mayen in a snowstorm aboard a C-130 cargo plane. And just last week, to top it off, at a challenge from some government officials and General Sunde, I jumped out of an airplane at the Reader Defense Facility at 13,000 feet, and I'm still here to talk about it. And it was a great experience. And you know, it's interesting in all these when I talk about this, people say, well, you know, what are you doing all these things for? And it's a great experience, a learning experience. The tandem, I did not jump out of the plane by myself. I was attached to somebody who knew what he was doing. Special Operations Force person, but he explained that this is a training facility and what they need to do in many situations, especially in a place like Norway and helicopter, places you can't get into. They need to bring a doctor or a nurse in a remote location. They need to bring somebody in this tandem type of facility that I traveled in. Similarly, when I was on the F-16, I was quite surprised that when we took off in tandem. There's another plane right next to us. The wings were almost touching each other. I didn't quite know what that was all about. But they were on a training mission, and they were pretending that was an airplane that was incoming over the North Sea and that we were chasing after it. So that there's a lot that the military is continuously doing to support us and secure your nation and our nation. We know from bitter experience that terrorists strike at home and abroad. They may be foreign, they may be domestic. I remember so vividly hearing about and watching the horror of the attacks in Oslo and Utøya on July 22nd. I shared with the Norwegian people the sadness of the realization of how many lives were lost or irreversibly changed, attended numerous religious services and others. We, of course, in the United States are only too familiar with such tragedies, and I must say we had another one, I don't know if you've seen another horrible tragedy yesterday in the Washington, D.C. area. I also admired the firmness and resolve with which the Norwegian government and people responded to and followed up on that July 22nd attack. The report of the Independent Commission on the July 22nd attacks was critical of the government, but the fact that the commission was formed, that it was completely free to do its job, and the transparency which the government has followed through on many of those proposals demonstrates a great and important truth about Norway. As an American born and raised in a city, Boston, that hosted some of the most important events of our Revolutionary War, I admit that I don't fully understand what a constitutional monarchy is. But when I saw the role the king played in comforting and uniting the people of Norway, I appreciated the value and the uniqueness of the royal family of the Kingdom of Norway, and the affection and the respect with which the royal family is held here. And I think that's really something that Norwegians should appreciate. Norway plays a unique role in the family of nations, addressing global issues, including promoting respect for human rights, democracy, good government, peace, stability, global health issues, and prosperity. One of my first official acts was accompanying President Obama, as I said, when he visited Norway, and watching him receive the Nobel Peace Prize in December of 2009. It was quite an experience for a newly minted ambassador, having been here for less than a month. And I at first worried whether that would be the highlight of my whole experience here. I'm happy to say it was perhaps the highlight, but not the only highlight. And things did continue in great stead here in my service as ambassador. The United States and Norway have cooperated and plan to do more to address global issues of these dynamic times. Some of the most important global issues in the Norwegian-American partnership are environmental energy issues, including climate change, the Arctic, natural resources, and global health. President Obama and Prime Minister Stoltenberg agreed in that meeting in October of 2011 on the need for a negotiated two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians. They confirmed their commitment to turn the United Nations as a forum for discussion on such things as climate change and maternal health. Following the direction of our top executives, our diplomats and development professionals continue to share ideas and coordinate plans for post-2015, the date the United Nations set for achieving the Millennium Development Goals. As Prime Minister Stoltenberg told the President in October of 2011, we have accomplished much, and we will continue to accomplish much more. One specific area that we are exploring is further cooperation on developing clean energy for the developing world. More than 2/3 of the people in sub-Saharan Africa have no access to electricity, and the situation is similar in parts of Central and South Asia. Norway, the United States, and international community have new programs aimed specifically at developing power markets in these parts of the world, and doing so in a way that is both economically and environmentally sustainable. Over the past several months, we've been discussing ways to work together more closely. These are really interesting and innovative programs which use the power of private sector capital and market forces to develop solutions that are more effective and more sustainable than traditional approaches to development aid. Both the U.S. and Norway are leaders in development assistance, and we're both doing exciting new things, and we can learn a lot from each other. Climate change, which is being seen in the Arctic in more dramatic ways than any other place on the planet, is attracting greater attention and cooperation. Last summer, I participated in Secretary Clinton's 3-day visit to Oslo and Tromsø. Secretary Clinton supported Norway's candidacy to host the permanent secretariat of the Arctic Council, which is now up and running. Accompanying Secretary Clinton was my most memorable trip to Tromsø, but it was not my only trip. Twice I participated in Arctic Frontiers Conference, perhaps the largest gathering of private and public sector expertise on the Arctic. Researchers, politicians, security professionals, non-government organizations, reindeer herders, oil and gas companies, indigenous peoples representatives, local and national government representatives from Arctic and near-Arctic countries gather for a week in Tromsø. One of my roles at the Arctic Frontiers was to introduce emerging leaders, young professionals from a broad spectrum of work whose energy and commitment gave me hope that there's a new generation striving to address the big picture. Secretary Kerry, who is a fellow Bostonian and a longtime friend, is anything if even more committed to addressing global climate change than Secretary Clinton was. So those young professionals will continue to have the support of the United States. I admit to feeling some pride when I heard President Obama tell the Norwegian Prime Minister, the state of cooperation and respect between Norway and the United States has never been higher. I feel a great affinity to Norway. I believe that I have played some small role as the President's personal representative to the Kingdom of Norway in maintaining and strengthening our mutual cooperation and respect. I do feel a great personal affinity to Oslo and to Norway. I hope to have a chance to visit Norway again sometime soon and perhaps continue some of the work in building business and academic connections between Norwegians and Americans in the future. I have enjoyed the friendship and hospitality of Norwegians, been challenged by your directness, and thoroughly honored to have the opportunity to live and work among you for almost 4 years. It really does not get much better than this. Thank you again for coming today, and I'm happy to take any of your questions.
Thank you.